What makes a major scale major? What notes do you use? How does it sound? Well, in today's video, you're going to learn the answers to those questions. And at the end, you'll be able to build any major scale starting on any white or black key. If you haven't already subscribed, I want to encourage you to do so. Ring that bell so you can get notified of new content as it comes out. Without further ado, let's get right into it. Before we dive into today's video, let's just do a brief review of what we covered in episode 1, where we talked about understanding the keyboard. And we talked about the 2 black key group and the 3 black key group and how that helps you locate your white keys. And so with the 2 black key group, we've got the dog house, where we pretend like we have that little roof there and your D is right in the middle. And then we've got the 3 black key group, where if you think about the word first, the first letter of that word first is F. If you just focus on those 2 notes, that just gives you an anchor to locate all the other white keys on the keyboard. So that's just a brief review, and hopefully you've been going over those things and been just getting those notes memorized and just being able to look at the keyboard quickly and know what's going on. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about the major scale. And the major scale is probably the most widely recognized scale in music. So I'm just going to play it real quick for you, and I know you'll recognize it right away. Very distinct sound, and much of classical music, pop, rock, folk, worship music, and many other genres are going to rely on this particular scale. And so it's just the bedrock, it's just the foundation. And so everything is built off of your scales, your intervals, your arpeggios, your chords, everything kind of sits on this foundation. And so understanding how your scale is put together and what the notes are and the relationship between those notes is very, very important. So before we get into the specifics of building a major scale, we need to talk about whole steps and half steps. And so understanding these 2 concepts are essential in understanding really any scale, really any interval, scale, chords, is really understanding these foundational concepts of what a whole step and a half step is. So let's start with a half step. A half step is simply put from one key to the very next key, whether white or black. So for example, we have C to C sharp. Now it's spelled D flat, but for now all you really need to worry about is just the fact that they're just literally right next to each other. I'm going to give you another example. E to F is actually a half step, even though it's not from a white key to a black key, because there is no black key in between E and F. And this is the case also for B and C. Okay, so half steps, super simple. You're just going from one key to the very next key on the keyboard, whether that's going to be white or black. For example, leaving here, G flat to G, there's your half step. Now a whole step is just a little bit larger than a half step, as the name implies. And for example, with whole step, you're going to be going from C to D. You're going to be skipping a black key. Okay? Now this is also true in terms of E to what we call F sharp. Notice that I'm still skipping a key, but it's a white key. So with a whole step, the way to think about it is you're jumping over another key on the keyboard. So you're skipping a key, whether that's white or black. So again, half step, very, very small movement, just from one key to the very next key. And then whole step is going to be a bit larger, where you're jumping from one, or you're jumping over a key on the keyboard. Okay. All right. So now we're going to jump into understanding sharps and flats. Okay. So this is important as we get into building major scales, because that's where the black keys come into play here. Black keys are going to help to give us our sharps and our flats. Okay. Very simple concept. And again, I like to use visual imagery to help kind of drive the point home. So we're going to start with sharps. Think about like the point of a nail or a screw. It's sharp, so it points up. Okay, so sharps are going up the piano. So if we go to here, C. Okay, now I know it's spelled D flat on your screen. I wish I could change that, but this is if we're thinking sharps, we're thinking C to C sharp. We're thinking up, sharp keys. Okay, and so if we're going up, okay, we're thinking sharps. Okay, C sharp, D, and so on. Okay, so when you think of a sharp, you're going to think up. Okay, just like a screw or a nail or something pointy is pointing upwards. Okay, when we talk about flats, we're going to be thinking down. So think about a flat tire. Think about a tire that is flat. Your car is going to kind of get lower to the ground, right? The tire is going to go lower because there's no air in it. So think flat is lower. Okay. Now if we go here, we got D flat. Okay, it's spelled correctly there. So D flat. Now notice I just played the same note. Okay, so depending on whether you're going down or you're going up will determine your sharps or your flats. And as we get more into our sharp and flat keys, you'll understand this in even more detail, how this works. The main thing that you need to understand is that sharps are up and then flats are down. Okay, so D flat, C flat, or B flat, A, and so on. Okay, so really simple concept. That's just a little bit about sharps and flats, at least an intro to it. And then as we start building more sharp and flat keys, you'll understand how all of that works together. Okay, so let's go through the C major scale. We're going to go through the C major scale, and we're going to talk about, we're going to go back to this idea of whole steps and half steps and how that all works together. Okay, and then we're going to jump to a G major scale, and that's going to incorporate actually a sharp in it, and so we'll kind of see how that works as well. So with a C major scale, we call it a C major scale because our first note starts on a C. Think about your first note as home base. Whatever key you're in, your first note is going to be your home base. Okay, so in this case, it's C major. So we have C right here. Okay, and now we talked about whole steps and half steps. So what we're going to go over before we go into the scale in more detail is what I like to call the major scale formula. And so what that is the major scale formula is basically a series of whole steps and half steps put together in a particular order. Now what's great about this formula, it's very much like math, and you can plug this formula into any series of notes, okay, and you're going to get a major scale. And so if I start on C and I went through the formula, it's going to sound like a major scale. If I start on G, it's going to be a major scale. If I started on B flat, it's going to sound like a major scale as well. It doesn't matter what note you're starting with, as long as this whole step, half step formula is applied. Okay, so we're going to walk through that real quick. And so we're going to start on C. And so the first part of this is a whole step. So C to D is a whole step, right? We're skipping that black key there. Okay, so we have whole step. The next part of the formula is another whole step. So whole, D to E, another whole step. And then we have a half step. So whole, whole, half. E to F. Remember, our E to F is still a half step. F to G, another whole step. G to A, another whole step. A to B, another whole step. And then B to C, we finish with a half step. So if we go back over that again, we've got whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. Okay? So whole, half, whole, half. Okay? That's your formula. And we're going to apply this to G major in just a second. And understanding the formula is essential, because then you understand why and how your black keys start to get incorporated into different scales. For example, the key of B has 5 sharps, okay? And that's because we're starting on a particular part of the keyboard where, in order to complete that formula, we've got to incorporate more black keys than, say, C major that has none. Okay, C major is the only key or the major scale that does not have any sharps or flats. Okay, and that's why we started with it. It's a great starting point. Okay, so we're going to apply that formula now to the G major to build a G major scale. Okay, so again, G is our home base. So we're going to start with G, and we're going to just go ahead and apply that formula together. So our first one is whole step. So we got G to A, whole step. A to B, another whole step. Next we need a half step. B to C, there's our half step. C to D, there's our whole step. D to E, another whole step. Now here we need another whole step. Okay, now if we just went from E to F, that wouldn't suffice because that's a half step, and so therefore we have to go from E to F sharp, which I don't know why it's spelling G flat, forgive me, but F sharp here, we're thinking sharps, to complete the formula, because we need a whole step in this particular part of the scale. So this is where our first black key gets introduced. And then from F sharp to G, there's our half step. Okay. Now G major is a major key that only has 1 sharp. Okay. And we're going to be getting into a really neat visual way of understanding and seeing all of your key signatures, called the circle of fifths, in another lesson down the road. But for now, just know that your key of C, or C major, has 0 sharps and flats. Key of G is going to have 1 sharp, and it's your F sharp right here. And the reason is we have to complete that formula. It all goes back to that idea of having that formula. So let's go back over it real quick. G to A is a whole step. A to B is a whole step. B to C is a half step, whole, half. C to D is whole. D to E is whole. E to F sharp is whole. And then F sharp to G is our half step. Breaking it down like this makes it very easy to understand. And what I want to encourage you to do between now and the next episode is to practice, and you can start on any key, okay? It doesn't matter if you don't understand exactly what key you're in or the key signature itself. You could start with any key, white or black, on the keyboard, and as long as you understand what whole steps and half steps are, that's step 1. Step 2, understanding the major scale formula, okay, which we talked about that, whole, half, whole, half, okay? As long as you understand that and you apply that, you can build any major scale starting on any key that you want to. And I encourage to do this quite a bit. and just do it with lots of repetition, just so you get used to building a major scale, how it sounds, and how the notes relate to each other. And so in our next episode, we're going to dive into the major scale and actually learn how to play the major scale properly with our right hand and our left hand, using the proper fingering, and go into a couple other concepts as well. But I hope you found today's video helpful. And again, if you didn't watch episode 1, I encourage you to go back, watch that, just to kind of catch up on the material. And we'll see you back next time.